Hello, I'm Emile Sherman, and welcome back to the Sandbox, a Seesaw Films podcast on creativity. Before we jump into today's conversation, I want to let you know that the Sandbox is now on YouTube. So if you'd rather watch the podcast than listen, there's a link in the description, or you can search this title. This is part 2 of my conversation with longtime friend and collaborator Luke Davies, a brilliant poet, novelist, and screenwriter. He's known for the novel Candy, which I adapted for the screen prior to Seesaw, and was actually the film through which Seesaw co-founder Ian Canning and I met. Luke wrote the Oscar-nominated screenplay for Lion, which Seesaw produced in 2016. He also co-wrote News of the World starring Tom Hanks, and most recently we've been working together on Tenzing, our latest film about Tenzing Norgay's world-first Everest summit with Edmund Hillary. Today we look at Luke's creative process and how he creates under pressure. We zoom in on some more detailed and pragmatic aspects of creativity, such as receiving notes, collaborating with producers and directors to elevate a film, and advice for aspiring filmmakers. Enjoy the conversation. Hey, Luke, welcome back to the Sandbox. So this podcast really at its core focuses on not just creativity, but creativity under pressure, because that's the world we're in. And I know working with you over many years, we've had times where, you'd work all day through LA, do notes, you'd then continue through till 5 a.m. when I'd go to sleep. And this is when we were getting Lion together, ready for Cannes. And it was just like creativity and pressure were hand in hand. Do you think pressure helps creativity or does it hinder?
Yeah, look, the basic answer for me is that yes, it does. Sometimes it's only at 53%. It's just over the line of this is not really helpful. I'm losing my mind and I'm fully stressed and I'm operating on adrenaline. That's not good and you can't sustain that for too long. That can be fun for a short period of time. I remember all the adrenaline of when we were trying to get Lion ready in order to, get it to meet deadlines, basically. And now I get really hungry that the passion projects, the things that I'm doing that aren't yet connected to anyone because I haven't shown them to anyone, I get really hungry to fit them in with the stuff that is very timetable, where people are saying to me, here's your commencement date, here's your delivery date, here's your contract, and you're suddenly part of a system where you owe deliveries to people. And I don't want to not be part of that system. So I'm very efficient.
Which works better? I mean, if you can judge your own work in that way, is it the work where you've got that deadline or the work where you're just doing your own thing and give yourself the time you need?
Deadlines are good. Yeah, that kind of pressure is good. But again, I'm coming back to that thing of saying, if I order my life in a very orderly fashion, I myself am doing the work of reducing the pressure. And if you're the kind of person who's a bit more spontaneous and chaotic, you're not necessarily going to do yourself any favors. First of all, in terms of adrenal fatigue, that's a real thing, I believe. You can psychically exhaust yourself and not be functioning at the highest levels and therefore not producing stuff at the best levels and therefore not in touch with the characters that you're supposed to be in sync and sympathy with and so on. So yes, I do sound very conservative in some of my answers here, but orderly forward movement is a good thing. And yes, there's always pressure, and I kind of love the pressure, but it's also nice when you're on top of it as opposed to swamped and drowned in it.
There's probably a sweet spot, isn't there, where you want just enough pressure, but not so much that you just put into a adrenal depletion.
There's a book called Flow by this Polish kind of psychiatrist with an unpronounceable name, but it's a kind of great book, and he talks about that. Flow is this optimal state where you're pushed slightly beyond the limit of your capacities, but you're fully engaged without distraction. And I live for that state. That's the best state. It's really hard to find that state when you're doing pitch meetings and writing synopses and writing treatments and getting people to love you at that early stage. But it's really easier to find that state when you're actually engaged and moving forward in a project that's been agreed upon by everyone, and you've created the palace, and now you can let the characters wander through the corridors.
What makes you decide that something is your next project, gives you that confidence to go, I'm going to take this on and devote, as we know, months and months, if not years, to a project?
It has become a real mixture. Again, I feel so grateful that I've become a person functioning in this world and sometimes in demand for projects and so on, so that sometimes now projects came to me. My old problems were desperation and scarcity economy. Like, yes, I'll do that.
Yeah.
Terrible thing. And now they're a little bit more like I can take my time and really work out what is the best thing that I can do in terms of seeing myself as being an artist creating things. So a new part of this equation in recent years is making choices about who you're working with, and hoping and assuming that you have a good radar about the people who are at best a little bit too chaotic, at worst very toxic and narcissistic or sociopathic or whatever, of whom there are those people for sure in the industry. But working collaboratively with human beings who love to play, but are also playing at a very high level of making films that get out into the world and are good films. And so that does affect the decision making. That's not the ultimate thing, but just super bluntly, it's like I intend to keep working with Seesaw because you guys are a beautifully functioning company that does that and that has these really great personalities and people in it, and you guys build that from the bottom upwards. But the bigger choices are about do I access the vision, whether that's a sudden light bulb or whether that's a slow burn? Do I find a way of accessing the vision of what this can be? And am I the person who has skills that can help that become a thing? And do I really hope that I get this job? And how can I convey to other people that my passion and my own vision and blueprint in order to hopefully get this job? So ultimately, what's that about? We keep circling back to this same conversation. The works of art that carry within them the transcendent, and the radiant.
I imagine it's also about what stories or characters allow you to play in that palace or to exist in that palace that you described, where you get to explore different rooms, and it's an expansive place. It's not a place where you're just fishing for minnows over and over. And to do it with people who want to go on that journey. I mean, just jumping to those creative relationships, and a core one as a writer is with the producers. What do you want? What do you want out of a relationship with a producer? You know, what works and what doesn't work?
The thing that I really want and realize is a really good quality in producers is when they themselves are not so kind of elevated that they're just a little bit checked out. And beneath the checked outness is a kind of rapid speed chaos that happens when you do engage with them. More than anything else, when that is frustrating, it's when they don't really know the material that you're trying to engage with about, and yet they're the stewards of the material, right? They're the captains at the helm of the ship, and when they're away from the helm, that's not a great situation. So I find the most meaningful relationships with producers are with producers who are passionately and intellectually engaged with the stuff that's going on. Like at some basic level, even if they're fantastically successful and they're making so many great movies, that they have an understanding of the basic story structure of this particular specific project. Because for them, they might be in a company where there's 15 things going on. But for me, my one connective tissue with them is this thing here now, and this project that I'm going to try and deliver to them and make it work. Work means get it financed and it attracts good actors and it becomes a great film. So there is that. And then a kind of a sub category of that relationship is that you really like producers who engage with the story, with your drafts as they develop, and feed back to you notes that are about the question of this is good, how can we make it better? And so, and that's what's called creative producers, as opposed to, I guess, physical producers, or the producers who are really good at the nuts and bolts day-to-day stuff of putting it together, but who aren't necessarily very good at eloquently expressing insights into story structure problems and architecture problems and so on, because ultimately those problems, story structure and architecture, are what allow you to create the emotional narrative that makes the good films that win the awards. That without the emotional narrative going on, then they're just a different category of films. And those films are fine as entertainment, but they're not the thing that moves my heart the most.
Yes. I mean, I find that you are incredibly good at taking notes. Taking notes, the wrong expression of being open to good notes when you see them. I've never written anything, but I would imagine I'd find it very difficult because you spent so long writing something, and by definition, you hand it in, you're going to feel like, I'm proud of it. I feel like I've cracked it. And then the person over the other side goes, love it. Just had a couple of thoughts, and then opens the door to a whole bunch of things, maybe just a few days or a week or two after you've spent, weeks and weeks, if not months, putting it together. How do you stay open? I mean, is it about the relationship of trust with the producer? And we'll talk about director in a second. But how are you able to stay open to notes? What's the trick for writers? Because I'm sure there are a lot of writers out there who really would like to be more open, but somehow there's a sense that the more senior you are, the less you want to care about what other people have to say. But you're an incredibly senior writer, and yet you're still very open.
Well, thank you. Listen, the secret that I've discovered in recent years is that it's so good to be open and permeable, like a membrane, to other people's input on what you're doing, because it makes you less rigid and less shut down. I was once upon a time that person, like, don't give me notes. I know what I'm doing. And of course you can do that with a poem. Nobody cares about what you're doing with your poem. No one's going to give you notes about a poem. Yeah, novels, publishing houses, yes.
Maybe they should more with poetry. Maybe that's the big easy game in poetry.
Yeah. But I just find it's way better to be open to the possibility that you don't know stuff, that outsiders who come along and look at the thing that you've been perhaps too close inside the engine room with for too long can get new insights that are really, really helpful. And I've come to really enjoy that process. I remember once upon a time speaking to Andrew Dominic around the time when he made The Assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford, which is a film that I love so much. And he was talking about someone else was not listening to notes about some other project, a friend in common or whatever. And Andrew said, I don't know, mate, it's like if enough people are telling you that you look pretty sick, then it's probably time to check into the hospital. And so there's an element of getting notes from people that's a bit like, yeah, if enough people are telling you the same thing, it's really good to be open and listen to them.
And of course, everyone gets notes at some point. It's just whether you get them before the film is finished and out in the world. You're going to get the notes at that point. So,
right. Yes.
But I imagine it's difficult to decide who you're going to be open to if your membrane's so permeable that you just, listen to every single person with a thought. I imagine that could be hard, but it is a sort of killer app to be able to be open to notes, because you are able to, I guess, make the thing better because you're taking in ideas and you're open to good ideas. And the paradox is, I think sometimes the more senior creatives get, the more they lose that ability. And maybe it's also because some of the people they deal with are younger. And so if you're starting out, it's like, tell me, older, wise people, what you think. But at a certain point, I mean, sometimes, Luke, you'll be getting notes from people half your age. There's something great in that too, because there's a totally different perspective that a younger person can give. But you need a robust ego / deep humility and also just an appreciation of what it can bring in order to be open to good ideas.
Humility is a good thing. There's that great T.S. Eliot line from Four Quartets: the only wisdom we can hope to attain is the wisdom of humility. Humility is endless. It's good to have a stance of humility in the face of the world, and that includes to me the mostly pleasures of the situation of believing that you can have a good creative relationship with notes and notes givers. Like, maybe the starting point is that I do have a fairly strong sense of self, that I am good at filtering out noise these days. These were not qualities
You're not scared of it. You're not scared to
Yeah, but it also means that I feel pretty confident that I know which notes to ignore. I know which ones are not helpful. It's not a matter of being aggressive or tearing people down, but there are ways of saying that's not relevant to me because of this, this, and this. But those notes are great, thank you. And
There's the risk on the other side of this, filmmaking by committee, which can be a homogenizing force. At the same time, if you've got a committee, the way I would think about it, and tell me if this sounds right to you, but if you've got a group of people who really, you trust and do understand the same version of the core flame of the film, then 1+1+1 can equal 10. But if you've got a bunch of different people, maybe not entirely, as you say, they're a little bit high level, they don't quite know what it's about, but they want to feel heard, then 10 voices can be reductive.
yeah, I've had both experiences. By the way, that concept of the flame, that is so beautiful. All of us understanding the flame of the film. What is the specific flame that we're trying to create? That's fantastic. Yes, I've had the experience of people just needing to be seen, to be making comments and being given really problematically stupid notes about something. And I've had that experience in particular, in the Hollywood ecosystem. It is unfortunately a very fear-driven kind of industry, so that in the hierarchical structures of studios where huge amounts of money are at stake, you get people who sort of whose entire MOs are a fear-driven version of panic and adrenaline and needing to be seen to say something and have input into a film. And yeah, you get to recognize those people and hopefully move forward without being too sort of getting too much collateral damage from those situations. I've had projects fall apart, which I guess are collateral damage situations, which never really happened for various reasons, including those reasons.
Those reasons. Do you think you can tell when notes are given from a place of ego, of like, I want to impose my thoughts, rather than a place of, I guess, service to the flame?
Absolutely, yeah. And worse than that, sometimes you can tell when notes have been given that are really nothing to do with the creative center of the project at hand, but they're an outside force entirely to do with that person's hierarchical relationship with other people in their organization and the need to be seen, to be saying something. That's
They're
really
performative. They're performative notes.
Yeah. But performative notes tend to sort of wither in the light of day, and not really work out in the end. I've been fortunate that stuff hasn't been a huge part of my working life, but it does happen, and when it does, it is so frustrating.
And what about directors, Luke? The relationship between a writer and director in film, it's different to TV in many ways. How does that work best, and when is it problematic?
Yeah, I love that's a whole other thing. I have been really lucky in a few examples, Candy with Neil Armfield, Lion with Garth Davis, Beautiful Boy with Philip von Groningen. With Jen, it's been 8 years of this incredible journey. 10 thing began because Jen came to me and said, "Hey, mate, I've written this treatment. It's not very good. If I gave you a couple of $1,000, do you reckon you could clean it up?" And back then, 8 years ago, I was like, "Oh yeah, I totally need that. I will totally clean up your." From that experience, that I went to her and said, "Jen, this is an amazing story. I might be interested in getting on board with this story." And at that exact moment, Lion had come out. So suddenly, for the first time, I was a little bit, quote, hot, unquote. And so that's how the Tenzing journey began with Jen Petum.
You're a writer. You write these scenes you've imagined, as you said earlier, in your mind's eye, the story and how it plays out. And then, the reality of the director's vision, the actors and how they see the characters, the design, the cinematography, the alchemy of how it all comes together, and the luck of what happens on the day as well. As we know too well with Tenzing, the luck of the weather gods are incredibly important. And then you see it. Is it generally a reduction or an elevation of how you've seen what you've written, or are you just not imagining it to that degree? So it's actually, oh my God, this is now real and it was never real before.
No, yes, it's an elevation. What I've found happens is you write this stuff and you write this supposedly really good screenplay, and you're so fortunate that this film gets made, and you might get to be on set a little bit or a lot. And so you see things being shot. That has its own magic. Later on, you can sit in a cinema or you can watch it, whatever. You can rewatch the film. That has its own magic. But there is a casting away of a lot of stuff. There is a letting go that I think is a very healthy experience for all human beings to have in all matters of their life. So the forced letting go from being a screenwriter and handing over something to a director's vision to become, hopefully, a beautiful work of art, a beautiful film. There's a letting go there. But there's these little moments, these little bubbles where the experience of elevation is extremely pure, extremely satisfying, and the best feeling. Whether it was on set a few weeks ago in New Zealand watching Tenzing scenes being shot, or whether it's rewatching Candy every now and again all these years later and being moved to tears by a scene that I wrote, and yet the emotional experience of watching the film is so kind of kinetic that I start crying in certain scenes every time because the scene itself has taken on its own life. And these experiences are magical, just that this little secret pleasure, hopefully not too egotistical, that is like, I wrote that line and that's a really good line. And that actor did such a beautiful thing delivering it and so on. I also like the fact that actors are their own incredible creatures and that they make interpretations of things that you've written which completely blow your mind because they make completely different choices about how to interpret the words. And that happened to me recently watching the rushes, the dailies of Johnny Flynn, small role in Tenzing. The way I wrote that role was very specifically in my mind, a particular kind of character. He made a series of choices which are completely different, and it's so beautiful. I was watching the rushes just going, this is incredible what he's done with that one-day shooting.
He's so fantastic, Johnny, and he always does bring a surprising interpretation or energy to it that can take sort of, even quite pedestrian moments, to a place you don't expect. What about the edit, Luke? Because one does... the saying is you write a film many times, the writing, the shooting, the editing. Obviously, there's the sort of marketing and the way it's portrayed out there in the trailer to audiences. But is the edit another writing process? How do you see the edit?
Yeah, I absolutely see that the edit is indeed another writing process with an absolutely complex language, as complex as the English language, with a grammar and so on of its own. And I bow down to that because I'm linguistically impoverished, to extend the metaphor, in that field. I bow down to the fact that in the edit, a whole new magic is going to happen that is completely beyond my control, my powers, my hopes, my projections, my dreams, my anxieties about how it's all going to come out. And now occasionally I'm involved in some ways in the edit because problems arise and it's like, what do you think? What could we do about this scene? Or could we dub new words to fix this problem? Could we get the actor in? That's called ADR, additional dialogue recording. Could we can you fix this problem? And so on, which is a pleasurable problem.
That's interesting to call it a new, different language. I never thought about it as a different language with a different, I guess, linguistic structure. One thing that comes to mind of how the edit differs from a screenplay and the shooting of it is the rhythm. The rhythm doesn't sit in a screenplay inherently, and it sort of sits in a scene, but the final film is the rhythm of the edit. How much weight and time you give different moments, when you come close, when you pull away. It's there's a sort of symphony to the edit that I love. I mean, Ian and I have always really come alive in the edit, not just in the screenplay side and the shoot. Be able to feel the rise and the denouement and when you're let off the hook and given some air, and when you're kept, when you want to accent something by going in closer, and when you need some ADR, which we've often, as you know, spent a lot of time working with you and other writers on getting ADR in at the right place in the edit to make sure that the moments, do land as they're meant to. But that's great to think about as a language. Just coming to the end of this, Luke, a couple of final questions. Thinking about what a good writer looks like and whether you can learn to be, what can you learn to do to get better at writing, and what essentially is talent or gift?
Yeah, it's a really good question. Now, I find it a difficult question to formulate a clear answer to, because you only have your own experience inside your own brain, your own life experience, the things that led you to become what you became, which in my case was the starting experience was the Agira, the wrath of God experience at 16 years old. But I think that I've definitely improved as a writer. Absolutely, definitely. I'm better now as a screenwriter than I was when I was younger. And that's a lovely feeling, and a feeling that I've earned it. And it's, I do
So
have
what's
skills.
better? When you say better, unpack that a sec.
I did not know that being less in control of the architecture meant being less in control of telling the story in the most eloquent way that allows the full emotional and spiritual impact to come out. And now I understand better that I can be comfortable and confident that I have certain skills somewhere within me to build the spiritual superstructure story through the characters moving around in the space that you've created. And that I have been learning how to do this in quite a kind of methodical way. So
you're back to being an architect. There you go. You fulfilled your 11-year-old dream there.
But I think the most important thing of all is that you need to be passionately, obsessively fixated on the glory of cinema. I can imagine there might be other reasons why you would want to be in this world and make films, and let's ignore the version of you just want to make lots of money, and I mean that's a valid whatever, but I'm talking about some other versions of just enjoying being in a world where near enough is good enough. That's a world that I have always tried not to be in my poetry and my novels, in the realm of films. But there's always books about how to write a screenplay, but really the best way to learn how to write screenplays is to read lots of screenplays. And I know a lot of people who don't do that. Werner Herzog said the best way to become a filmmaker is to read lots of novels. You should read, he said, you should read novels endlessly, and that will make you better. It's nothing to do with reading screenplay manuals or how to.
But you read screenplays?
Yeah, I do, and I did for a long time. Even back in the days before the internet, there was a place in Sydney, a shop that sold screenplays, photocopied and bound.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah,
it was a little shop in the middle of the city, and I would basically buy screenplays of movies that I liked, and then I would sit down and put the movie in the DVD and watch the movie with the remote. And I would try and follow the script, and I would pause when things were going strange, and I got incredibly valuable lessons in why things were changed, what must have not been working. Sometimes it was really hard to do. It could get really incoherent. I once tried to do it with The Thin Red Line, the Terrence Malick film. It's so incomprehensibly not the same as the screenplay that you basically lost for the whole 3 hours. But with other screenplays, back in the day, I used to religiously follow the reading of the screenplay with the watching of it and the pause to work out why is that thing that's in the screenplay not in the film. It gave you great insight into economy and sacrifice, things that it's okay to sacrifice, reasons why that works anyway. And some of the reasons.
And you talk about the sort of relentlessness as well of the art form, and that to make something great, you can't just not that anyone aims for ordinary, but you have to go beyond one's tolerance for what seems to be good enough, and just keep going. And you're an absolute perfectionist, and that's why we love working with you. But what do you look for in a film? How do you judge what a good film is.
A good film is a film that cannot be reduced to who is the good guy, who's the bad guy paradigm. But
Yeah.
way more than that. It's a film that expands the parameters of what it means to imagine yourself being alive and growing in relation with the other human beings. And so at some very basic level, that's the cliche of art as a filter of real life, or art as a mirror, I guess.
But you're talking about expansion. You're
Yeah.
saying art needs to be more than a mirror.
Yeah, I guess I am saying that. I'm saying that art needs to be a conduit towards expansion rather than contraction. And some of this comes back to the thing of having been a drug addict and making it out the other side. It's like, I didn't get clean to contract, I got this kind of second chance, and I've read the message behind that as being, you are one lucky bastard. Don't waste the second thing, that whatever the second thing is.
So a great film gives you access to the sort of rooms in the palace that you may never have visited.
Yeah, a great film gives you access to the gods. A great film helps you throw away the little rickety fishing line that is catching the minnows when you're standing on the whale, And then, when I moved to LA after Candy was made, trying to get representation, that was my pay the rent money for about 6 or 7 years. I could barely even get a meeting with a junior executive. I couldn't get representation. I couldn't get an agent. I couldn't get a manager. Everyone in this town was like, "Oh, we love your dark little Aussie drug drama with Heath Ledger and Abby Cornish. But come back and see us when you're hot." So, in a terrible way, there's a side of this town that is a heat-seeking town, as opposed to a build people up and develop people kind of model. Yes, and I wrote the film reviews for The Monthly, an Australian magazine, for quite a number of years. I took solace in the fact that way back in the 60s, a bunch of those filmmakers in the 50s and 60s, like Godard and people like that, they were all film critics for Cahiers du Cinéma, the famous film magazine from the 50s and onwards. And so I think it might have been Godard who said being a film critic is actually good training for becoming a filmmaker, because it forces you to engage with meaning and structure and intent, especially intent. A bad film critic talks about the film that they wanted it to be and why they hate it. A good film critic is able to talk about the film's success or failure at the level of what the film itself is trying to do. But yes, I don't do that anymore.
Did Godard say that? Was that something Godard?
I may be wrong, but I think it was Godard who said that.
No, I mean it's fantastic, because I think about that so much. I don't mind a film review that is punishingly damning of something that we've done if it engages with the film and doesn't say you should have made something else. I'm like, well, you go and make that. It's like no one's stopping you.
Yeah. But I loved being a film critic. It was that real starving artist, extremely difficult period. And The Monthly were kind and generous in letting me month after month after month choose whatever film I want. As long as it was going to be released in Australia at some point in the month the magazine was coming out, they were not telling me what films to review. So I had a lot of fun reviewing and seeing a lot of different films. But I'm happy not to be doing that anymore.
Well, it's great to talk with you, Luke, have such a far-ranging conversation, and thanks for joining us. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll be back soon with another episode of The Sandbox. See you then.